It's your voice, your vote. More than 2 million votes, countless ads, and months of campaigning, all of it coming down to this one day. Good evening, and thanks for being with us. I'm Ann Trujillo.
And I'm Shannon Ogden. It's going to be a fun night. I'm glad you're with us. In an hour, the polls close in Colorado with an election that really could mean monumental changes for our state and our country. And for the next 5 hours, we are going to be bringing you live reports on the biggest races, the most important issues. Until 10 o'clock, you can watch our Roku app, Facebook, Twitter, thedenverchannel.com, and then we'll also be cutting in during ABC News coverage as races are decided here. Then after that, join us on Denver 7 for a very special 1-hour broadcast. And here is the team making it all happen tonight. Only a small reflection of the photographers, editors, producers, production workers assembled to bring you the best election coverage in Colorado. We begin with the battle for the state's top job, governor. And Jacqueline Allen is with Republican Walker Stapleton in Denver. Jacqueline?
Seize the moment. That is what the GOP just sent out in an email saying that, guess what? GOP turnout is significantly behind 2014, and that is going to determine the election. They're doing a last-minute push to get people out to vote. But let's face it, this could be a tough night for the GOP, but the state party chair says, don't listen to the polls. Remember, they've been wrong before.
We certainly think that Walker Stapleton still has a chance. He certainly fought a very good campaign, and we've given the Colorado electorate, I think, a stark contrast between our candidate and the opposition, not only in vision and approach, but also competency. And we're just hoping that they, in our opinion, will choose wisely.
Now, ultimately, we are waiting to see how President Trump affects these elections. Some candidates have tried to distance themselves from the president, like Congressman Mike Hoffman. It's been a mixed bag from Walker Stapleton, so it remains to be seen how successful that has been. We will be live all night long here at Republican Party headquarters and keep you posted. Reporting live in Lone Tree, Jacqueline Allen, Denver 7.
And we will be going back to you, Jacqueline. I know you have the Republican candidate covered. We want to get to Contact 7 Chief Investigator Tony Kowaleski. He is with Governor Hickenlooper right now. Tony?
And Shannon, we are with Governor Hickenlooper. And Governor, let's start talking about the national races. Obviously, numbers are just starting to come in. But what's your take? Sources tell us you have a national future in mind.
I think this will be an interesting election because it really has become somewhat of a referendum on President Trump. Certainly, as I went around the country and did, spent a day here or a day there, there was an energy among the Democrats that seemed more than just their candidate. They wanted to make a statement that this attacks on the media, the attacks on minorities, that wasn't good.
Now, Governor, 2 years in this very same room, there were a lot of people gathered expecting a huge celebration in Colorado, a huge celebration nationwide. We all know what happened. What's your take on why tonight might be different?
Well, that's why we had these elections. And I think that's one of the great things about American democracy is that you have to wait for the election. But I think this time the energy is much more focused, and the Democrats have different candidates. A lot of these candidates are ex-military or business people that have spent some time with nonprofits, but they've got really diverse backgrounds. And I think as a slate of candidates, just the people running for Congress, all the governors, I think you're going to see a bunch of new Democratic governors, literally like 7 or 8 new states going blue with governors.
Let's turn our focus specifically to Colorado right now, and some political pundits on both sides of the aisle saying there's a very good chance for a blue wave in our state, and specifically Democrats could win all the statewide races. What's your take on that? Do you think it's realistic?
Yeah, I think there's a pretty good chance just because the early voting was so compelling. You saw, a swing of 70 or 80,000 votes from 2 years ago, from 4 years ago especially. So we'll see how that works out, but I wouldn't be surprised to see, I'm not sure it's a blue wave, but certainly a rising tide.
So if the polls are correct, and within a couple hours, Jared Polis wins and accepts on the podium behind us, what's your message to him as he walks into your office and takes over what you've left after 8 years?
Well, we set up a meeting for tomorrow with no matter who wins to make sure we sit down and talk about the agencies one by one and give them just a framework in an hour. But certainly Jared has painted a very focused picture of what he wants to do. And he does believe that you can go more renewable, faster, and have it be good for the economy. He does care about jobs. I think that we're going to see somebody who's very focused on education and accelerating the improvement in some of the more challenged schools.
And let's go to the initiatives that are out there. A lot of controversial ones right now. You put yourself out front on the transportation issue.
Yeah.
A lot of insiders saying 110 and 109 are both in trouble tonight. If they go down, what's that say about transportation issues in the future here in Colorado?
Well, it might say that people want incremental improvement. They don't want a big bite. Certainly 109 was a bunch of debt with no clear way how to pay for it. So it was going to take money out of our education funding, out of our healthcare funding. I'm not surprised that went down. I think 110, if it goes down, it's people saying maybe not so much so fast.
Some analysts have talked to me, Governor, about the fact that Tabor has created such an impact. The wording that has gone into 110 makes it difficult to end up with a successful outcome if you want more taxes and more roads. What's your take on the impact Tabor may have had on 110?
Yeah, probably with some negative input on it, but I mean, at some point the state, we've got the Amendment 23 around education, we've got Tabor, we've got the Gallagher Amendment. They all are contradictory. And this, when I got elected the first time 8 years ago, we talked about this. And I think maybe this will be one of the challenges Jared Polis will face, just like we did. How do you get the whole state together? We did a statewide initiative to try and resolve some of the conflicts between those constitutional elements. And we couldn't get it done.
I want to talk to you about 112 and 74, both amendments, individually and then together. First, 112. What's your take, and what will have to happen if it passes?
Well, if it passes, it's pretty explanatory. We'll have to, again, it is not a constitutional amendment, so it will have to have some sort of, legislative detail put to it. Whether that has to happen right away, whether that can happen probably in the legislative session, we'll figure that out.
Now, you talked about possibly bringing the legislature in for an emergency session over 112. Where do you stand on that tonight?
That would only be if the stakeholders all saw that there was a reason for it and to give clarity. Certainly, if it passes, that's the voice of the voters, right? And they're actually speaking, this is what we want. And, I opposed 112. If it passes, I'll support it. I opposed legalizing recreational marijuana. We've done a pretty good job of implementing it. My job, and I think Jared Polis's job, or whoever the next governor's job, is to implement the will of the voters. And so 112, if it passes, it'll get done. 74 is another controversial issue here. Bottom line, what's your take on where that stands and the impact it'll have? A lot of governments very concerned and watching that closely throughout the state. A lot of governments, a lot of businesses. It is an invitation for loose, wild lawsuits, a lot of times without relevance. They say that in Oregon they ended up with several $1 billion of kind of ridiculous lawsuits and many, like 10 million, I can't remember, over $10 billion of frivolous lawsuits that didn't even get into court. So just a lot of kind of craziness. I hope 74 and 112 both go down.
Okay, now we're having to wrap up here, but I've got to ask you one question. Let's pretend we're in a coffee shop in New Hampshire right now. Is there anything you want to tell the people at home about maybe a run for president?
Last time I joked about that, I got in a lot of trouble. So, no, we're still looking at it, my wife and I and my son, and, we spent a little bit of time in different parts of the state asking, can someone, a more moderate Democrat, get traction in this modern world? Is there an appetite for that, for some of the problems-based solutions, getting stuff done? We'll just have to see how it plays out, and probably not until February or March will we make a decision, well after I'm out of office.
Governor John Hickenlooper, appreciate your time and your insight and walking that line.
Good to see you.
Thank you. All right, there you have it. A lot of insight from the man that has held the most prestigious office in this state for 8 years. A critical night here, and we will continue to follow results at Democratic election headquarters throughout. Reporting live, I'm Chief Investigative Reporter Tony Kowaleski. And Shannon.
All right, thank you both very much. So if you're not following what he's talking about, Governor Hickenlooper was up in New Hampshire at this diner or something, and he says, I'm the governor of Colorado and I'm running for president. He said it was a joke. It's not very funny. I don't see how it was a joke.
And really, the bottom line is it was caught on camera, and then I think he realized that the camera was rolling at the time, and so that was video that went out all over the country, and so started the speculation. Kudos to Tony for asking him the question one more time, because we're just going to keep asking the question, because clearly he has started a pack and is talking about it, so we're just going to keep asking.
That was a hilarious joke, Governor. Thanks. So one of the big stories heading into this election was if moderate Republicans like Mike Coffman could survive in this Trump era.
And in just a matter of hours, we'll certainly find out. Maybe minutes here, who knows? Jason Grenauer joining us tonight from the Marriott in Lone Tree, where the congressman is waiting to find out his fate. Jason?
Yes, and good evening to you. As it turns out, this race for the U.S. 6th Congressional District here in our state of Colorado could turn out to be one of the bigger races statewide when it comes to national politics. That's because if this seat ultimately flips from Republicans to Democrats, that could help the Democrats take control, re-control the House of Representatives. Now, the Republican incumbent, Mike Coffman, I spoke to his representatives earlier on today. They say that he will not be making any statements, he will not be speaking to the media, and the only time we will be hearing from him tonight is once that race is called, either a victory or a concession speech here at GOP headquarters, the watch party, as they're going to slowly watch the results come in later on tonight. That incumbent Republican, Mike Coffman, is trailing in the latest polls. A Siena poll, New York Times, put out in mid-October. He was trailing his opponent, Jason Crow, by 8 percentage points. Now, you could say that that is a big obstacle to climb, but he's actually been gaining traction because another poll from the same people in mid-September, Coffman was down 10 percentage points, and in mid-September he spoke to our Ann Trujillo as part of Denver 7's Politics Unplugged about those polling numbers. Take a listen to what he had to say.
The race is a dead heat, and I think that it's obviously a very competitive environment. I don't believe the poll. I hope my opponent does. Let them relax, thinking that those are the numbers.
Now, Coffman has been down in the polls in past elections and ultimately gained victory. His last victory came by the same amount he's down in that last poll, 8 percentage points back in 2016. Be interesting to see what happens a little bit later on here tonight. For now, reporting live at GOP headquarters, I'm Jason Grenauer, Denver 7. Back to you guys in the studio.
Jason, thank you. All right, buckle up. It's going to be a very long night. We're going to be hearing plenty from him. On to Jace Larson with the Democrat in that race, Jason Crow's campaign. Hi, Jace.
Hey, good evening to you guys. You know, they are aware that the nation is really going to be watching this race so closely right here. We talked to some of the staff members earlier today. They tell me that they have been working this race and they are very happy with the amount of effort, the amount of volunteers that have been out here. And as always is the case, they tell us that they're feeling good, right? Every candidate tells us that before the numbers come out. But here they have a lot of good reason to do that. If you look around the room here, there's going to be a party going on here. You don't see anything happening right now. And that, at least according to the spokesman here for Jason Crow, is because their volunteers are still out helping people get to the polls, making sure that they're getting as many people out there to vote as they possibly can. They told me that they have been working this race, and considering that they are acting like, rather, that they have been behind. They have been putting forth all of the effort that they possibly can, and even though the polls do not show them behind, they wanted to run a race, though, that was something where there was no stone left unturned, where they tried to do as much as they could. And for the people who have been watching this race, there has been a tremendous amount of work. They have often talked about some of the differences here, trying to paint these candidates in one of two camps. Who can you trust? Who can you trust to stand up to Donald Trump, for example? And that's been certainly a lot of the messaging that we have seen on television. As we talked about, it's just after 6 o'clock now. The party's going to begin after the polls close. They're expecting a couple hundred people to be here. We're going to continue, obviously, to watch it here. We're not going to go anywhere tonight. And as things kind of change and evolve here, and as the nation's eyes continue to stay here, as Jason mentioned, on this race, because it's going to be so important in the national scope here, and which party gets to take over the House of Representatives, we're certainly going to stay here and continue to let you guys know as things change and evolve. Back to you.
Thank you, Jace, very much. Hey, look what happened while Jace was talking.
You know, we have a big night here in Colorado, so we asked two experts who know all things about Colorado to join us tonight, Crisanta Duran and former House Majority Leader Amy Stevens. So House Speaker Crisanta Durant.
Appropriately to our left,
yes.
and she to our right.
Just like we planned it. So glad you are both here. We've been talking about really the two big races that people are talking about in Colorado, the governor's race and the 6th Congressional District. So I'm going to just throw it on out there. What are you two thinking? What are you two seeing out in the trenches?
Well, it's so funny. I was today at the hair salon, and the person next to me is talking about voting, and then the receptionist is saying, "Oh, I've got to get out. I'm going to go vote." Listen, I think the story of the evening is going to be the independent voter under the age of 45. They're leaning Democratic. They're not voting monolithically, though. And I think you're going to see them pick and choose issues. And I think you'll see that tonight with the governor's race and also with the Crow and Kaufman race.
Well, I think we need problem solvers in office, and I think that the faith in the people that have been in Washington, D.C. and who has been there leading is very, very little. And so when we look at where we're at as a state right now, it's been wonderful to see how many people are coming out to vote and be part of the process. I'm very excited to see how the results go tonight. And I think on behalf of the Latino community, I'm so excited to see that tonight we may have a record number of Latinos serving in the State House and in the State Senate, and a record number of Latinas serving. So I think we'll see how the night goes on and how the results roll in. But I think there's going to be a lot of races that are very close.
So we're going to talk for about 3 more minutes here before we take a quick little pause. But I want both of your take on this. Earlier we were talking to the chairman of the state Republican Party.
Jeff.
And
Jeff Hayes, yep.
Yeah, Jeff, and he was at the Walker Stapleton, and he started his remarks with, "I think there's still a chance Walker can win." That doesn't sound like a campaign that's in overdrive and ready to win tonight.
Well, I think, for the most part, people have really thought that Polis, with his money, with the amount of money put in the race, far more than Walker, could pull it out tonight. I think, but again, I'm probably with Jeff. You have to see. I will personally say I'm not sure when we look at how campaigns are run, if that is the most far-reaching and best run, I'm not sure. I will be surprised tonight if Walker Stapleton wins. I mean, I'm crossing my fingers, but I think Polis could prevail.
You also said something interesting where you said these younger voters are going to pick and choose.
Yes.
What do you mean?
Yes.
They're not going to complete their ballots?
Yes, you're exactly right. I think you're going to see a lower voter turnout on certain initiatives because people just go, I just don't even know what to do. However, if you look at 2014 and you look at 2018, 2014, 41% of Republicans. Now in 2018, 34% of Republicans in terms of getting out the vote and registered. You have 34% Democrat, and again, the independents have gone up 5 points in 4 years. That's huge. And the crowd that's turning out are under 45. If you're 50 and older, you have voted and you're on your way. Mm-hmm. But the younger voters are the last to vote. And I think you're going to see them decide this election. And right now, I think they're leaning Democratic.
And the younger voters are going to vote for Democrats. You know, Republicans are underperforming across the state right now. It is really interesting when you think about that because there's just is not that momentum to get out and vote. And I think a lot of it has to do with Donald Trump. There's not faith in the direction that he has taken our country. And I do believe that Jared Polis will be our next governor. And I think that we're going to see big wins for Democrats tonight.
I don't think that has to do with Trump at all. In 2010 and 2014, Republicans picked up 676 seats across the nation, and Barack Obama won in 2012. Same thing, Republicans picked up more seats in 2014, and I just think this is history. It's not about either one. You could say, oh, it was all about Obama's policies. Today you'll say, oh, it's all about Trump policies. This is about history.
But we are seeing it in exit polls as well, that there is definitely that Trump factor, especially with turnout.
Well, it has a major impact. In the Republican primary, we saw Republican candidates go as far to the right and really represent extreme values for Colorado. You know, we cannot forget that Hillary Clinton won Colorado. Mm-hmm. And look, we're not like Washington, D.C., regardless of whether you have a Republican next to your name or a Democrat next to your their name. We want people who are going to be problem solvers and really put the people of Colorado first. And unfortunately, the leaders in Washington, D.C., Donald Trump, has not put the people of Colorado first. I also think moving forward, the 2020 election is going to be very, very competitive. And if I were Cory Gardner, I'd be concerned tonight.
I wouldn't be concerned if I was Cory. And in fact, I think we're seeing the best economy we have had in 8 years.
Amy, thank you, Barack Obama.
Right there.
Oh, thank you, Trump.
Prasanta, Amy, they're here with us all night. We're just getting started. We're going to turn it over to ABC News for a few minutes. Stay with us.
During our break, you know, George, when we talk about Florida, we split it up into 3 parts. We have South Florida, we have the Panhandle, and then we have the I-4, which I think will decide who wins this race. I was tracking the numbers early in South Florida. More diverse voters, younger voters, more Hispanics in South Florida. In Miami-Dade County, in Broward County, in Palm Beach County, Nelson's tracking pretty much what Hillary Clinton did. The problem right now here, we have 98% precincts reporting in South Florida, but overall in the state, let's see where we're at, 90 reporting. It's dead even. The problem for Nelson right now, there's a couple of these very small counties that are very red that could help Rick Scott. We'll have to wait and see. One good sign, Duval County, Jacksonville, Nelson's on top there. That's a bellwether. Republicans tend to do better there. That's a good number for him.
And what are we seeing in the governor's race in Florida?
In the governor's race in Florida, let's take a look. Let's jump over there. Of course, Andrew Gillum. Let's see here. Back in the governor's race. Zoom in here. Really close to George DeSantis, barely on top, 90% reporting. But again, we're basically seeing the same map. You know, we thought there'd be a lot of connection between Gillum and Nelson. It's almost exactly the same. Duval County, where DeSantis is actually from, Gillum's on top. You can see South Florida as well. It's the same thing. One good sign for Democrats that I'm seeing, they are picking up some of these blue counties, right? They're turning some of these counties blue in the I-4 corridor. Pinellas County, which is one of these bellwether counties we've been watching pretty closely. We know that Gillum's up there, 50 to 47. It's really close, though.
And George, very important point. 90% of Florida has reported, but only 51% of Broward County, that's a very solidly Democratic county down south, and only 75% of Miami-Dade County. Those are a lot of Democratic votes in both those counties and a lot of votes still to be counted.
Keeping an eye on that. I want to go to Florida right now. Whit Johnson is in Tallahassee, Gillum headquarters in Tallahassee. You had a bit of a rain scare earlier.
Yeah, George, that's right. We knew there would be drama in Florida on election night, but we weren't expecting the rain that we saw here. All the media had to be rushed off the platform for a period of time. We had power surges, power outages here, but the rain has cleared for a moment after some thunder and lightning. You can see behind me, this is Gillum headquarters here at Florida A&M University. The crowds have come in. They're starting to gather here. But we talked to voters throughout Florida here today, and all of them said the same message, that they were casting their votes not just for the local candidates, but really to either vote in support or against the Trump agenda. If we're looking at the governor's race, Tallahassee Mayor Andrew Gillum, an underdog, was not expected to win in the primary. He won with massive outside support. Bernie Sanders was an early supporter. President Obama, Hillary Clinton, millions of dollars came in from mega donors like Tom Steyer, like George Soros. He's going up against Ron DeSantis, the Republican, the congressman who actually resigned his seat so that he could focus on this race. He was in lockstep, all in on President Trump. President Trump endorsed him, basically handpicked him early on in the race, and it has been an ugly battle for governor here. Allegations of racism thrown towards DeSantis and some of his supporters, accusations of corruption towards Gillum and his camp. So it has been ugly, but they've been plowing forward. The Senate race, many people believe Bill Nelson, if he is to survive here in the state of Florida, up against Governor Rick Scott, that it would likely have to be turnout. Supporters who were pushing for Gillum could help Nelson win.
Okay, Whit Johnson, thanks very much. Matthew Dad, let me bring you in on this, because this governor's race was interesting. You had in both Gillum and DeSantis the new faces in the Republican Party defeating in the primaries the established candidates.
Yeah, absolutely. They both beat the candidates that were supposed to win in this. And to me, Florida is one of these key states. The key states is it's a swing state, and both of these races there are going to go down to the wire.
Florida is such an important state every single year, midterms, presidential. Matthew Dowd, thanks very much. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Watching
ABC News Live, and when George and the team take a break on the broadcast network, we keep it going up here in the skybox overlooking the main set at ABC News election headquarters. Such an interesting night thus far. It is a young night, however, and speaking of youth, we're getting voter engagement in these midterms like we've never seen before at all stages and all demographics. So let's take a look at how people are reacting on social media tonight. ABC's Kenneth Moten is watching that. Kenneth, what are you seeing?
Dan, you're right. The numbers are up across the board here. Here on the East Coast, and so the polls are still open in the Midwest and out West. And so what we're seeing is that a number of people are still standing in line. They've been standing in line for hours. There've also been reports of people whose voting machines have been working. Some of the polling places, there have been some technical issues. We'll get to that in just a moment, but let me take you to the board and I can show you some candidates who are still telling people to stay in line, to continue voting, including this representative.
All right, we're going to turn our attention to Colorado right now. This is a Your Voice, Your Vote 2018 election update. ABC News covering the national implications of the midterm elections for us this evening, while we're, of course, here covering issues important to Colorado. I'm Ann Trujillo.
And I'm Shannon Ogden. The polls close less than half an hour in Colorado, and you can see we have a countdown clock there on your screen for you this evening, so we can all stay on top of it. So let's get right to the major races, the proposition, the amendments that we are tracking for you tonight.
Colorado's top job is up for grabs as Democrat Jared Polis takes on Republican Walker Stapleton, currently our state's treasurer.
Now, Jared Polis has been ahead in most polls. Strong support we're seeing from unaffiliated voters, from women, according to a couple of research firms. And then Stapleton showing a lot of support from the rural areas and among fiscal conservatives. All right, let's go to the 6th Congressional District race right now. It has two military veterans against one another, Republican Congressman Mike Coffman and first-time candidate Democrat Jason Crow.
And this is a race that is certainly being watched all across the country. Coffman was elected to the seat back in 2008. He's had some very tight races since then, a district that most recently went with Hillary Clinton. Recent polling has shown that Crow is ahead of Coffman. However, this is a district that has shown surprises in the past, and so clearly we will be watching the 6th Congressional District very closely all evening. We also want to check in with our first field crew as we are covering all of Colorado's elections.
Tony Kovaleski live at the Democratic headquarters, where they are very closely watching results tonight. Tony?
Shannon Ann, voters starting to make their way in here tonight. We just heard a cheer about some national result that came in, but this is a room that has some history. 2 years ago, it was packed, expecting a celebration. We all know how that wrapped up nationally and an impact locally. Tonight, the polls, the numbers, the voter turnout numbers showing the Democrats likely to have a far different turnout. We will continue to monitor it. Some say there may be a Colorado blue wave, in fact, and Democrats could sweep all the statewide elections. We'll be watching closely. Reporting live at Democratic Election Headquarters, I'm Tony Kovaleski. And Shannon?
You know, we're all watching and waiting for those polls to close. We want to get to another field crew. That's our Jacqueline Allen.
That's right, live with the Republicans. So what's the mood like there, Jacqueline?
This party is just getting started. People are just now starting to trickle in. And, you know, the Republicans are not giving up this fight. You know, the GOP worst fear is what Tony was just talking about, a sweep where they might lose the governor's race and the state Senate. Listen to what the state party chair had to say to me earlier tonight. What are the races everyone is watching tonight here?
State Senate races, particularly the ones in Jefferson County and Adams County. Beth Martinez-Humenick, Tony Sanchez, Christine Jensen, Tim Neville. I mean, those are some of the key ones that will determine really how the legislature flows, because the House of Representatives, it's going to be a hard flip for us. I think we're going to see some surprises tonight, but the state Senate is the key, because regardless who the governor is, you know, dealing with a split legislature is a different animal altogether than dealing with one party dominating.
He's predicting some surprises tonight. We'll keep you posted here from the GOP Watch Party. Reporting live in Lone Tree, Jacqueline Allen, Denver 7.
All right, Jacqueline, we sure appreciate it. It's not going to be that dead behind her, I don't think, all evening long at the GOP headquarters. So stay with us. As we said, we're just scratching the surface of a very long, very fun, and very important night here on Denver 7.
We will be here throughout the night, both on air and online. Our continuing local coverage on Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and on Roku. All you have to do is search for the Denver 7, thedenverchannel.com.
That's right. We'll be here all night long, and hope you will be too.
matters. Your dream kitchen by Specialty.
All right, we're back, and we're going to be streaming all night, trying an experiment here on our different platforms. I'm glad you're tuning in. So, voter turnout has been pretty impressive early, but even with all the early turnout, we've seen extraordinary day of turnout as well.
We are still waiting to hear the final numbers. We won't know that for a while, but we know we're at about 2 million people who had turned in their ballots by about midday today out of the 3.4-ish registered active voters here in Colorado. So turnout, a big issue today. Denver 7's Russell Haythorne has been out monitoring the polls. And Russell, so far everything seems to be moving along without any trouble?
Yeah, and no major issues here in Denver or really throughout the Front Range today at these voting centers. What you're looking at here is a stream of cars coming up to drop off their mail-in ballots. You can drop them off here. You can also vote in person at this location. We're at the Harvey Park Voting Center in Southwest Denver. We're at this location because they were having some minor issues earlier this evening or earlier this afternoon with their printers here at the Harvey Park Voting Center. They were essentially having some delays with the printers that were printing off the paper ballots for those who come in to vote in person. It was taking 15 to 20 minutes when they'd like it to take anywhere from 2 to 3 minutes. So that caused a delay for people voting in person, but you also had the option at this voting center and at voting centers throughout Metro Denver to vote on those electronic voting machines. So you didn't have to wait if you didn't want to, but if you wanted a paper ballot, you were delayed by about 20 minutes or so. As of right now, there is no line to vote here at Harvey Park. So again, things going very smoothly here in Denver, throughout the metro area, and up and down the Front Range today with day of Election Day voting. And again, these cars right here, they're dropping off their mail-in ballots. You have about a half hour to do that, and you still have a half hour to get in and vote in person as well. We're live in Southwest Denver. I'm Russell Haythorne. We'll toss it back to you guys.
All right. Thank you,
Russell. All right, so far so good out there. Although perhaps the most immediate impact for Coloradans won't necessarily be the candidates who are elected tonight, but what is decided on the amendments and propositions.
And certainly none more controversial than Prop 112. So if this one passes, it would force new oil and gas drilling to be no less than 2,500 feet away from homes and schools. And out in the middle of those who think this is a good idea, Denver 7's Jennifer Kovaleski. She's live at Zeppelin Station in Denver's Rhino. Jen?
Shannon, and Colorado's booming oil and gas industry could be hit a powerful blow if Prop 112 passes. Remember that it increases the setback to 5 times what it is now. The current regulations are 500 feet from homes and 1,000 feet from schools. But as you just mentioned, it would be half a mile from any occupied building as well as vulnerable areas. Now, we are here where supporters and Colorado Rising, the group behind this measure, are expected to start gathering in the next half hour or so. This whole thing was born through a grassroots effort. People who are living in Erie, in Boulder, in Broomfield, frustrated and fed up with the increased drilling and the lack of regulations and say in how close is too close. They believe that these wells shouldn't be that close to homes and schools. Now, this is expected to be a very closely watched race as well as a very tight race. I want to talk about the polls. The latest polls, and there's not a ton of polls, but the University of Colorado poll from mid-October showed this measure passing 52 to 48. Another poll around the same time showed it failing, 47 to 43. Bottom line, this is going to be a very close race. It's going to be one that will likely go late into the evening tonight as the votes are continue to be counted, and one that's also a lot of money has been spent on it. You've probably seen the commercials. They've been on TV, on radio. They've been everywhere. The oil and gas industry has spent more than $30 million to defeat this measure. Colorado Rising, on the other hand, has raised $986,000. So you can see this is really David versus Goliath. A lot of people working to try to get this passed. Whether or not it will is to be determined. We will be here live all night long watching what happens, many saying that this could set a national precedent for fracking regulations across the country if it does pass. And even if it does fail, this was interesting, I've been talking to some people in the industry, and they brought up the fact that even if it does fail, a close vote could force the industry to have to compromise to restore confidence in investors, because otherwise they run the risk of a similar measure being on the ballot in 2 years, when the Democratic vote could be, when the Dems could come out with an even higher turnout in 2 years. So we will be here live all night watching this race and bringing you the very latest. For now, we're live in Denver. I'm Jennifer Kovaleski for Denver 7.
All right, Jen, thank you.
I've seen an ad or two about that. Yeah, thank you, Jen. So just as a large number of people are supporting Prop 112, there are plenty against it, and Ryan Luby is with those folks at the Hyatt Regency, right?
Yes, a lot of folks here, a lot of industry folks, as you can well imagine, folks who want to see the 112 be defeated, because they've said for a long time now that their jobs depend on it, and thousands of jobs potentially depend on it. I'm here with Dan Haley, he's the president and CEO of the Colorado Oil and Gas Association. You know, looking around the room, are you cautiously optimistic, or what's the gut telling you right about now?
We're confident. We're confident that Coloradans are going to see this for what it is, which is a ban on the oil and gas industry, and they're not going to want to put working families on the unemployment line across the state. So we feel good about this before the results come in tonight.
Right. What are you, I guess, who have you been looking to reach in this election cycle? There's a lot of folks out there, and I think this issue crosses both sides of the aisle. You have folks who are for 112, who are Republicans and Democrats, and vice versa. How do you reach the people to try to go along with voting against this?
First of all, we wanted to leave no stone unturned through this election, so we've gone after all sorts of different demographics and sectors. But really, to us, energy is a nonpartisan issue. This is something we all rely on every single day. We're very fortunate in this country and in this state to wake up in the morning and flip on the lights and know that they come on, wake up and have our iPhone charged. And so we feel like we're blessed to have vast resources of energy here in Colorado: wind, solar, oil, natural gas, and that it should be a nonpartisan issue. So we've reached out across the state to unaffiliated voters, Democrats, Republicans, urging them to vote no on Proposition 112, but really trying to show them what's at stake. It's about jobs, good paying jobs for our state, but also it's about tax dollars that come back into our communities to help build the things that make our communities special: hospitals, parks, recreation centers, all those different types of things. And so there's a lot more at stake than just those jobs that we talked a lot about.
Well, just so everybody's clear, polling right now shows this to be a 50-50 split. I mean, this this is a wild card as far as wild cards go, because it's tough to really know, which way 112 is going to go. Let's talk about the hypotheticals here for a second. Let's say 112 is defeated. Do you all walk away from this and stay the course, or do you all have some hard discussions to figure out how do we prevent something like this from happening again?
I think we have to work to prevent this from happening again. It's not good for industry, and it's not good for Colorado overall. So our commitment all along, and we recommit to it tomorrow, is having conversations with Coloradans about what we do, why we're doing it, how we keep our employees safe, and how we keep our communities safe. I think we can't talk about that enough. It's important that people understand all the things that we do really to do this cleaner, safer, and better than anywhere in the country. And we need to have those conversations with Coloradans. The fact that we're having this, debate tonight and having this vote tonight tells us that we need to have those conversations and make sure that Coloradans are comfortable and know why we're doing what we're doing and why,
Absolutely. Well, I mean, we did a Table 7 here on Roku and Apple TV, for those of you watching it, just a few weeks ago about this specific issue, bringing people from all different backgrounds literally around a table at the Greeley Chop House in Greeley, great steakhouse, and to have a hard conversation. We had people from, representing the pipe fitters union, to a metal fabricator, to homeowners and landowners who really never had a vested interest in oil and gas until they had to have conversations with the industry because wells were going to go in their backyard, essentially. And the message that we kind of heard from that discussion was the industry could do a little bit better of a job of working with people and maybe being more transparent, maybe being less aggressive. I mean, any number of words could be applied. Dan, how do you see that? Is there an opportunity for the industry to, for the lack of a better phrase, maybe be a little bit better of a neighbor?
I think there's always an opportunity to be a better neighbor, and I think we have been a better neighbor in recent years. I think if you go back 5-6 years, we didn't do a good job of having those conversations and telling people what we were doing and why we were doing it and showing them how it was safe and why it was safe. And so I think we've done a better job of that. I think often, and things change and issues change, I think it's important to look to the technology and innovation that's been happening out in the field that is making things better. 3 years ago, the largest driver for complaints of the state was noise. And the oil and gas industry stepped in and through technology and innovation created these quiet frac fleets and different things to really bring that noise level down to where that nuisance isn't quite there. We understand that when anything is happening in your community, whether they're building a Starbucks, expanding a road, or an oil and gas development, there are some nuisances there, and we need to do a good job of making sure we're mitigating those. We don't want our neighbors and communities to have those nuisances. We have every reason to try to get it right every single time.
And work with folks as best you can.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, talk about, there's been some speculation that if 112 were to pass, Governor Hickenlooper may call a special session. That's pure speculation. You heard him here just a few minutes ago on our air talking about how, it would require key stakeholders to come to the table. Dan, where does the industry sit on something like that? If this passes, would there need to be that sort of immediate legislative, interaction to take this on?
I think if this were to pass, we would look at all of our options and what that looks like going forward. The governor brought up the idea of a special session. I think that would be an interesting thing to see. If you could bring lawmakers back to take care of some of these things. I don't know where you would go from there or what you would exactly do in that special session, but I think it's going to be very difficult if this were to pass for the next governor and the next legislature to figure out how they're going to deal with this. How they're going to deal with more working families on the unemployment line. How they're going to deal with that loss of a tax base that we pay back into those communities. In 2015, 2016, Colorado oil and gas industry paid over $800 million in K-12 taxes. Those dollars won't be replaced if this were to pass. So I think there's a lot of tough conversations that would have to be had at the state level should this pass.
Dan Haley from the Colorado Oil and Gas Association, I appreciate it. Thank you for the conversation. We'll be here all night, as will Dan, with all these folks that you see behind me, folks who work in the industry, some of them engineers, some of whom I know, to kind of bring you their reaction as these results come in. But as we know full well, polling shows that this is a 50-50 sort of split on 112, so this could very well be a very long night. Shannon?
All right. Thank you, Ryan.
Ryan Luby, thank you. We are back with our panelists now. We know that this is a personal issue, 112. Amy Stevens, Crisanta Duran, both of you here. You both know very well how the legislature works. Are you seeing the possibility of a special session here if this comes down to the wire with that 50-50 split?
Well, Madam Speaker would know, I think.
Well, I think that we're going to look at all of the different ballot initiatives that could potentially pass tonight and reach out to stakeholders and see if there's language that needs to be clarified. I'm very concerned about Amendment 74 passing, and that is another initiative that has been very, very close, that I think would have detrimental impacts on our economy and also lead to frivolous lawsuits. So I think we're going to do our due diligence, see how the results come in this evening, and then if there does have to be additional steps, we need to make sure that there's robust stakeholder work and that we also uphold the will of the people.
So I'm curious, you've both been there, you're there now on your way out. You look at the oil and gas lobby here, we theoretically know they're strong, they're powerful, they're well funded. What is the real effect of that money and that lobby like for a legislator here in the state?
Well, I think both of us know that keeping business here. We've had a governor, to Governor Hickenlooper's credit, that has actually worked with the oil and gas industry as a kind of a mediator of sorts, and I've appreciated that over the years. I think this initiative was very clever to tie up $38 million that likely would have gone to probably a number of races in my party. And so I think that if 112 passes, I'm not even sure. I mean, Casey Becker said, whoa, 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 if she becomes Speaker, we're not so sure we're going to run after all this just yet. I like what Madam Speaker is saying here about let's bring the stakeholders together, because if 74 does pass, you're going to have, I think we're going to have some problems, and the legislature will have to address on some level. Get into listen, the devil's in the details. Crisanta knows this.
Yeah, look, when I look at Colorado's economy, there's no doubt that there are a lot of hard-working families that depend on their jobs in the oil and gas industry. That said, I think that there could be more to be done to empower local communities to make sure that their health can be protected, that safety can be protected in their communities. And so I think there's work to do to strike the right balance when it comes to oil and gas development in this state. For the upcoming legislature, whoever is in control in the House and the Senate, I think that this is going to be a key issue. And what is very interesting about ballot initiative 112 is that there has been so much money that has been put into educating voters against it, but yet it is neck and neck. And that says something about where the people of Colorado are, that there needs to be additional steps done to make sure that we have reasonable policy in place when it comes to oil and gas development and how it impacts our Colorado communities.
Because I saw some information, I mean, about just the jobs that are generated by the oil and gas industry where people are making six figures, and they want those jobs, and of course we want those jobs here in Colorado. So are you saying that really local control is really the better route to take?
Well, I am a lame duck speaker, so I get to pass over the gavel.
And you get to speak your mind tonight, as it concerns us.
Go ahead, Crisanta. Speaker of the House. But what I would say is I do think that there are some additional steps that are needed as it relates to making sure that we have the best policy in Colorado. And maybe one path to that is looking at local control.
So again, back to my initial question is the power of that lobby. Are there any sitting lawmakers who oppose this? I mean, who support it, excuse me?
Well, as it relates to the money that has been invested into politics as a whole for our elections from the oil and gas industry, look, I mean, there have been millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars. I don't think we'll have a full accounting until after the election, but when we think about who is in control of the Senate, you know, thinking about races like the Faith Winter race or the Jesse Danielson race, where we had really strong candidates and who have been outspent dramatically. The amount of money has been astronomical, and so I think as we look at where we go forward from here, you know, it also cannot be beneficial to the hardworking Coloradans who work in the oil and gas industry to also constantly feel under attack. You know, it seems like year after year there are ballot initiatives that are coming forward on both sides. This election year is just that. We see that with Amendment 74 and also the setback initiative. And what we need in the legislature, regardless of who wins and loses tonight, are some people who are there who truly want to be problem solvers, listen to the concerns of communities across the state, and strike the right balance, thread the needle to make sure that we have the best policy in Colorado for oil and gas development that takes in consideration health needs, safety needs, community needs, and move Colorado into the right direction.
Now, I would say that we actually have had that, and we have some of the best oil and gas policies anywhere in the United States. And we have an oil and gas commission that, of course, is also appointed, and our governor plays a big role in that. I think, Madam Speaker, it's outrageous to say that the two candidates have been outspent when the Democrats by far have had money pouring into races because Jared Polis has actually financed his own. So I think what Democrats will like to do is try to take the oil and gas issue local as opposed to statewide. We've had Attorney General opinions on this. I think the oil and gas industry is going to say, local, you've got how many districts, how many different laws. I think we need to actually work closer at the state level.
All right, Amy Stevens, Crisanto Duran, they're with us throughout the evening, but we're going to move on for just a moment.
We'll keep talking, but in the meantime, Liz Gilardi is at the Westin downtown. We know the Democrats are gathering there tonight. So, Liz, what's the mood there tonight?
And Shannon, so we've been hearing actually some cheers as people start to gather, and they're watching some of the national results come in on the TVs behind me. An energized crowd here so far. They've gathered here to watch the results come in for the governor's race, but we're actually focused on some of the statewide races and important seats and watching to see if those seats turn blue. Colorado has long been a swing state, a purple state, and that's why other statewide positions like the Attorney General and the Secretary of State could indicate a broader shift. We'll also see if the balance might shift in the state Senate. Now, we do know that in 2010 and in 2014, Republicans outvoted Democrats in Colorado, but this election is on track to have a large voter turnout, and specifically, a lot of independents have been voting. As of this morning, Democrats have outnumbered Republicans heading to the polls, and as we said, unaffiliated voters could play an important role in that. We're going to continue watching those results come in tonight and watching to see that balance of power. Reporting live, Liz Gilardi, Denver 7.
All right, Liz, thank you.
All right, stick around. We're going to take actually toss you out to ABC News special coverage on their very gorgeous new set. Please check that out, see what you think. And we'll be back in just a few minutes. Our coverage continues all night long here on Denver 7.
Just how daunting this path was for Donnelly.
Yeah, we've been talking about this all night, but I want to focus in on Indiana right now because Donnelly actually did really well where he had to. He won in those 4 districts, those 4 counties we were talking about earlier, Gary, Indiana, South Bend, Indianapolis, but it was this coalition of red. And we talked about those donut counties, all those counties surrounding Indianapolis, some of those suburbs. He couldn't win those. But we should focus on Indiana for a bit because the reason why Braun wins, it's a coalition of those tiny counties. And when you go into those tiny counties, they're really small, but he's hitting at 63%. He's north at 60 in almost all of these, 75% in some. The Trump voters, the Republican voters, turned out in those areas in big numbers.
They did. And Nate Silver, a pickup here for the Republicans. You had high odds for the Democrats to take over the Senate going into the night, getting a lot higher.
For Republicans to keep the Senate.
Yeah, I mean, for Democrats to take it, right, the odds are against them.
Yeah, no, I mean, they have to draw to an inside straight now. Indiana was one of the places that could be a problem for them, but not as difficult as North Dakota, for example, or West Virginia. And so you see, for example, the odds now of a GOP Senate majority are around 95 in 100. It was a tough task to begin with. When you lose toss-ups, I mean, Indiana, that's the most important call of the night so far. It didn't go Democrats' way. It suggests problems for Democratic incumbents in other rural states, of which there are a lot elsewhere on the map.
Mary Bruce, you cover Capitol Hill for us every single day. Big night for Mitch McConnell, the Republican leader.
Absolutely. It's a huge night for him. And to Nate's point, so much of whether or not the Senate can flip will come down to those deep red states where Democrats are now in the fight of their life, like Indiana, where you have so many Democrats who are trying to walk this fine line. On one hand, they're trying to show they can work with the president, but they're also trying to show that they can stand up to him. And I have spent a lot of time in these states like Missouri, North Dakota, West Virginia. And what it comes down to for a lot of Republicans there, it's going to be hoping that they get a bounce off of Kavanaugh. So many Democrats hoping that if they hammer health care enough, it'll bring them a win.
I want to take a look at a couple of those big red states. The vote not ready to project in either of these Senate races yet, but we do have some votes coming in from the state of Tennessee right there. You see Marsha Blackburn, the Republican, with a wide lead over Phil Bredesen, moderate Democrat. Democrats had some hope that he might be able to do well there, but he is not. He is trailing Marsha Blackburn right now. Juju Chang in the Blackburn headquarters just outside of Nashville.
I'm not hearing you properly, George, but I will tell you that Marsha Blackburn is in the House watching the election returns. Her staff is incredibly confident and pumped up about what they're seeing in the early returns. But what I will tell you is that the Tennessee voters, and remember this is a very deep red state, is very much an open story. It's an uphill climb for Bredesen, and they offered a very stark contrast to the popular former governor who was basically campaigning on a theme of civility, and yet it seems as though the enthusiasm in the exit polls are going towards Marsha Blackburn, who is a firebrand, who boasts about being a knuckle-dragging, unapologetically, anti-politically correct congresswoman, and she seems to be maintaining the support of women, especially suburban women, which is a key swing group that both sides have been looking at today. She's been holding it by a margin of 59 to 41, and it looks like very much an uphill climb for Phil Bredesen tonight, George.
Not ready to call it yet, but Marsha Blackburn has a big lead. Let's take a look at the state of West Virginia right now, where the incumbent Democrat Joe Manchin is up against the Attorney General Patrick Morrisey. A lead there for Joe Manchin, Democrat in the most Trump state in the country. Matthew Dowd, he did his best also to hug President Trump when he could, but he really emphasized the issue of health care.
Yeah, he absolutely emphasized the issue of health care. And keep in mind, he was one of the only Democratic senators to vote for Kavanaugh in the hearing and go back to that. And so I think this may be an exception to the rule where the Democrat is able to overcome geography, which is a problem in West Virginia. It's a deep red state, deeply favors Donald Trump. We'll see if Manchin can pull it out. This may be the few areas he can overcome it.
This is a close one. Joe Manchin, though, a known quantity in the state of West Virginia.
Absolutely. They know Joe. He says, I'm still the guy that you know, that I'm just a little older. But you saw, George, in that ad where he took aim at the lawsuit filed by 20 AGs in this country,
including Patrick Morrisey,
including Morrisey himself,
that would invalidate Obamacare and the pre-existing conditions. We'll be right back.
This is Dan Harris continuing our coverage on ABC News live up here in the Skybox. Let's walk outside here and talk to two of our analysts tonight. This is the microphone. Hello, guys. Mike
hey, what's happening, Dan?
Tara Setmayer. So, Mike, let me start with you. Nate Silver said Indiana is the most important call of the night. The Democrats losing at
And we're going to step in a moment with local information. This is Your Voice, Your Vote. We will join our partners at ABC News here in just a moment. But right now, we just wanted to remind you, polls are just about to close here in Colorado. Good evening. I'm Ann Trujillo.
And I'm Shannon Ogden. Let's get to the major races and issues we are tracking for you tonight.
Colorado's top job, as you know, it's up for grabs. Democrat Jared Polis takes on Republican Walker Stapleton, currently our state's treasurer.
So Polis has been leading in most all polls. Strong support from unaffiliated voters, strong support from women. Stapleton getting the support of rural Coloradans and among fiscal conservatives as well.
All right, let's talk about propositions and amendments here. All eyes across the state are watching the results of Prop 12. This is the one that would change the distance on oil and gas drilling from homes and schools. This one is this in the polls neck and neck.
That's right. And we've seen high-ranking Democrats, high-ranking Republicans against this, but we've also seen lots and lots of support, lots of commercials. I know you know, as well as Ann and I do, our airwaves have been flooded with these, especially after the deadly explosions we've seen here in Colorado. So we're going to be watching this one closely, and I think the whole country is going to be watching Prop 112 tonight.
Definitely. We're about 2 minutes away from hitting 7 o'clock straight up, so we have a lot of coverage to come tonight here on Denver 7. We we are hoping that you will stay with us and our partners at ABC News.
So all night on our streaming platforms, Facebook, on Twitter, on Roku, Apple TV, even when you don't see us here on television, we have complete coverage with an enormous team of reporters and also some very insightful panelists with us this evening as well.
We'll see you again here on Denver 7.
Danielle, fighting for her political life. Claire McCaskill supporters are starting to trickle in. They sort of seem to be a mix of excited and also cautious, reflecting what she has already acknowledged, which is this is going to be a nail-biter. Now, Claire McCaskill is a Democrat in a state that is pretty largely Republican, and she admits that this has been a very tough race. She won by double digits last time. This time, she knows that it is all up in the air. Her Republican challenger, Josh Hawley, has had a lot of support from President Trump. In fact, the president was just here last night. So this is going to be the fight of her political life. She also voted against Judge Kavanaugh. She knows that that might cost her some votes. She says she doesn't really regret it because of the grounds on which she did not vote for him. But things have changed here in Missouri, and she knows that. She says she's talked to voters a lot. She recognizes that a lot of them are very supportive of the president and that she's going to have to reach out and work with the president should they grant her a third term. But that's going to be the big question. Will they give her the benefit of the doubt, Dan, and give her a third term? It's still too early to tell. The votes are just trickling in. Not looking great at this moment, but it's still very early in the night. And Claire McCaskill, we don't know. Could be in it for a big surprise, or she may surprise others. We'll see.
There you go. Thank you very much, Deb Roberts. Let's take a look at where things stand right now in the House. The race for the House. Democrats need to pick up 23 seats. They've made a gain of 2, but the night is young. Let's take a look at where things stand in the Senate. The Democrats need to make a gain there of 2 seats, but the Republicans are the ones who have made a gain, and that comes in the state of Indiana, where the Democratic incumbent has lost, Joe Donnelly. And let's talk very quickly before we send it back to George, that we can project a winner in Florida House District 27, the Democrat Donna Shalala, who you may remember was the former HHS secretary under Clinton. Very quickly before we send it back to George, I misspoke in our last update. I said stay online is the hashtag. It's stay in line. If you're in line right now, you can still vote even when the polls close. For now, this is Dan Harris. Let's get it back to George downstairs.
Live. We're ready. All right, everybody, it is 7 o'clock.
You know
just after
means?
7 o'clock. That means the polls have closed, and so all decisions have been made. Not official yet to have those numbers. I'm Ann Trujillo along with Tom Mustin. We're glad you're joining us tonight as we continue our nonstop coverage here on Denver 7 on all of our platforms.
Again, I'm Tom Mustin. So let's get right to the major races and some of the other issues that we're talking about right now.
There is so much going on tonight. First of all, the 6th Congressional District, I think, is one of those races that people are watching so closely tonight, and that is where Jason Grenauer is. His eyes are on the Mike Kaufman camp tonight. Jason?
Yes, and good evening, Tom. Happy election night and happy party, at least here from the Republican Watch Party. We actually have some people. The band is on. We have the headsets on, and some of the major players have started trickling in, rather. Walker Stapleton is here in the House, as well as George Brockler. One person who we have not seen yet, however, is Republican Congressman Mike Kaufman. We're told by his camp that he's expecting a big race tonight, but he will not be issuing any statements to the media. He won't be talking to anybody until that race ultimately concludes a little bit later on tonight. The polls just closed too early for those numbers, but we do know, as far as numbers go, he is currently being outspent by his opponent, Democrat Jason Crow. He's also behind in the polls, as recently as just a few days ago, down by about 8 percentage points. Now, that's how much Kaufman won when he was reelected. There's a lot of divisiveness and a lot of diversity in this 6th Congressional District, which includes Aurora, Brighton, parts of Centennial, and Littleton, so it could ultimately come down down to that minority vote. We asked Kaufman about that in mid-September. Take a listen.
So you don't find that R is detrimental to your political future?
So in those immigrant communities, what I've been able to do to break through is to get them to identify me and a lot of people in the district, not on a partisan basis, but as their congressman.
That nonpartisanship is what Kaufman has been touting, saying that he's in a working caucus with Democrats and Republicans trying to enact major change, including to our immigration system. Now, in 2016, when Kaufman won by that 8 percentage points, which I mentioned earlier, that was only 31,000 votes. So it will most likely come down to turnout. Who comes out in that 6th congressional district? Where do they ultimately cast those ballots? We do expect, if that turnout is high, that could ultimately overcome this, but Kaufman has been behind in the polls before and ultimately won. We will have to wait and see. For now, reporting live at GOP headquarters, I'm Jason Grenauer. Back to you.
Thank you, Jason. And of course, Mike Kaufman not there at the headquarters tonight.
As planned.
As planned.
That was his plan, yes.
Exactly. All right. So a lot going on tonight. Let's head out to Tony Kovaleski's live at Democratic headquarters, where they're eagerly waiting the polls to close. They've just closed now. So any inside for us, Tony?
Well, he's there with Phil Weiser.
Well, yeah.
Go ahead,
Tom, and we are with Phil Weiser, the Democratic candidate for Attorney General. Phil, polls just closed. We've talked to a lot of political insiders on both sides of the aisle the past couple weeks. Many saying this could be the closest race all night statewide. Your thoughts right now with polls being closed?
We are excited because people have turned out. The level of engagement, it is beyond what we ever saw in 2010, 2014. That's because people are concerned about our democracy and people understand we need a people's lawyer as our Attorney General. So we believe the turnout, the excitement, the energy, it's going to help us win this important race.
There's a chance for a bit of Colorado history tonight. Colorado voters have not elected a governor and an Attorney General from the same party since 1978, a long time ago. Your thoughts on the chance of potentially making recent history?
So that was J.D. McFarland, who won with Dick Lamb. And they both won with a message about putting people first and leading in a way that brought people together to solve problems. That's what we're talking about. Both Jared Polis and myself have put together substantive ideas. We've been facing deceptive attacks. And in this moment, people know we need real leadership. We need real ideas. That's what people are getting excited about. That's how we're going to win this race.
On the other side of the aisle, George Brockler, who you're going against, has built a huge name in the metro area, a big name statewide. The fact that this is close, what's that message? What's that say?
We started in a primary election 30 points down. We started in the general election against a known figure. I'm a first-time candidate. But I've operated in a way that's been true to who I am. I've been authentic about my story, my commitment to public service, my ideas for protecting people's rights. What that shows to me is that be yourself, show up. I've been to every county. Stay engaged, and you can win elections. Colorado's a special place. People want to get to know who the candidates are, and they can figure out who's there to serve people, and they'll support you.
We've been talking a great deal about numbers tonight, and the numbers have been very favorable to this point with the Democratic turnout. About 117,000 more Democrats turning out than what happened just 2 years ago. What's your take on that voter turnout? Has it been a blue wave?
Here's what's going on. We are seeing our federal government operate in ways that are divisive. That's a threat to the rule of law. The Affordable Care Act, the protection of pre-existing conditions, the 14th Amendment and equal protection of the laws. All of those laws are at stake. And people know if they don't turn out to fight for the rule of law, to fight for democracy, then they're not going to be protected. So people are energized by an awareness that we need leaders to protect us. I've consistently said if our federal government does something illegal that hurts Coloradans, I'll stand up for people. My opponent won't do that. That's making a difference.
If voters say Phil Weiser's our next Attorney General in Colorado, what would you say right now was the difference?
The difference is I've had a substantive message about protecting people, about taking on the opioid epidemic, about protecting access to health care, protecting our land, air, and water in an era of climate change. People want a leader who shows up to protect them, who they can get cares about them. And I've been all across our state, most counties multiple times, building relationships, not just to win this race, but to govern. That's what is on the ballot tonight. It's our democracy. It's how we in Colorado